This happened in October of 2018. It was during the time when I was working at a riding stable. This is by far the freakiest thing that's ever happened. It started off with me mucking out stalls and taking horses in and out of pastures, etc. Around 12:30 p.m., my mom came to pick me up from work. Since I work at 8:30 a.m., I work in the morning hours and then I have the rest of the day off to myself. As I got in my van with my mom, she said that she drove past a cornfield a few hours down from the barn. What she saw while on my way to get me was a clown. I had asked her what the clown looked like, and she gave me a brief description of the clown. The clown looked like Pennywise from the It movie, the 2017 remake. My mom said, I couldn't get a clear view of it, but that's what I saw, what I remembered what he looked like. As soon as my mom said that, I questioned her on what street she saw the clown on, and when my mom told me that the cornfield was not far from the trail, I knew what she was talking about. The trail my mom was talking about used to be a train track many years ago, but ever since the train track was removed, people used it for many purposes like walking their dog, hiking, dirt biking, etc. My mom wanted to take the trail that was by the cornfield, the one where she saw the clown. I was going to tell her that maybe it wasn't a good idea, but she insisted that we do and take my dog there. My dog was a German Shepherd Golden Retriever mix, so he was only a few months old at the time. He wasn't really big, but he was always so rambunctious that we had to walk him every day. He was a puppy at the time. It was a pain in the ass to say the least, but fun too. My mom drove down the road that she took me to drive to and from work, as well as riding lessons. It was a quiet road and it never got busy. When my mom got to the cornfield where the trail was, she parked her van and me and her walked the dog out. We couldn't see the clown, but I wondered if he ran off to hide to scare us or something. I didn't want to look for the clown, so we started walking down the trail. It was surrounded by trees with leaves changing colors. It was fall, to which was my mom's favorite season. As we walked down the trail, we let my dog run to go do his own thing. After a few feet away from the van, I noticed the dirt bike on the ground upon getting closer. I looked to see that the bike had been there for a while. Unsure if the bike was stolen or not, I did notice some damage to it. The tires were slashed and the chain was broken. The bike seat was also ripped. I looked to see if anyone was around, but I couldn't see anyone. Thinking whoever left the bike was probably taking a piss or something, my dog was then staring at something in the wilted cornfield, not far from where I was. I walked up to my dog and grabbed his leash to be safe in case if he saw a squirrel and wanted to chase it. When I grabbed hold of the leash, I looked up at the wilted cornfield. Winter was approaching within a few weeks, so it was normal to see most of the cornfields wilted in the area. I looked to see a figure in the cornfield. That was what my dog was looking at. My mom was a couple of feet behind me, so she wasn't far behind. I could see that the figure looked like the clown my mom saw from earlier. He looked to be about 6 feet tall. He was medium build and he did look like the clown my mom described it to be. I wasn't sure why he was standing in the wilted cornfield, but if I had no idea what his plans were, I stared at the clown figure as it turned to face me. I could see that the clown had an axe in his right hand, and that was when shit hit the fan. Right next to the clown, I could see at least 3 or 4 men dressed in black about a few feet away from the clown. I was nearly pissing myself as I wondered about why those men were there. If it was private property or something, why couldn't they have just told us to leave? The clown slowly began to walk towards me and my dog. I almost froze in fear at this point. Suddenly, out of nowhere, there was a blood-curdling scream from somewhere in the forest. It sounded like a woman was screaming, and I lost my shit right then and there. I booked it down the road the way I came with my dog, not looking back. Then I caught up with my mother and I told her to run as we did so. Despite my mom having breathing problems, we ran all the way back towards our van. As soon as we got into our van, we looked back to see if the clown was behind us. There was no one following us, but we didn't want to stay around to find out. My mom drove down the road until we got to our hometown, looking occasionally for any vehicle that might be suspicious to try to follow us. When we got back, we reported the clown incident to the police and they went to the location where we spotted the clown. Shortly after that, we headed home without any hesitation. The next day, my mom got a phone call from the police when she picked me up from work, and what they said will forever send chills down my spine. My mom told me that the clown with 3 or 4 men were luring people in the trail we went to. They had found a few bodies of people, one of them being a 6-year-old girl. I was sickened by what the police found, knowing what those men were waiting for me and possibly my mom and dog in the cornfield. If my dog hadn't alerted me and my mom about the clown and his men, I pretty much wouldn't be alive today. Let this be a warning. If you see anyone wearing a clown mask in the forest or cornfield, run away from it. Don't stay with the clown if you want to stay alive. Now, this happened to someone who happened to be living in Oregon at the time of the story. It was October of 2017, and the man who was around his 40s, his name was Lawrence. Now, how I knew about this was because he had came to Canada in 2019 and told many stories in the high school I used to go to about his hunting adventures. This one was definitely one he never expected. Now, Lawrence was taking a hunting trip to somewhere in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Not really at that area, but close around to the area where he was doing hunting. He had been hunting in the woods and his home from his entire life. He decided to venture off further than usual in October, and it was the fall footage of the red and orange drifted around him, providing him a chilly reminder of the crispiness in the air. He hadn't been sure what he had been expecting on his particular outing, but he knew he was in for something when he heard the loudest rustle in the nearby bushes. At first he thought that it could have been a deer or maybe be some other animals, as he had been hunting for a while. Since he had been hunting, he thought that it could have been maybe be a deer. As he picked up his bow and fumbled to get the arrow ready, he steadied himself as the rustling got louder and closer. At first he thought that it could have been a coyote or maybe a wolf or a mountain lion, but he didn't seem to hear any growl or hiss or anything. However, he couldn't figure out where it was coming from or what direction it was coming from. But suddenly he saw the movement from the corner of his eye and readied his arrow, not knowing what kind of game he had to encounter. When he saw the creature was about maybe 20 feet away, it stood taller than it did, which was a tall. It seemed to step out between 2 trees into the clearing. Of course, he did not notice him, but it was a large creature. It was like a wild dog with huge snout and a thick hair, but its face looked all wrong. Its eyes were oddly human. As Lawrence felt a flash of the fear go through him at the fight, he froze in his place, but the arrow still in his bow, and his feet were planted firmly on the ground as he was getting ready to shoot to try to scare the creature off. It didn't look like a bear or a mountain lion or any other creature that he expected. However, though, with one swift movement, he had managed to pretty much shoot the creature when the arrow let out a howling noise. It didn't even drop dead. Whatever it was took off running in one direction while Lawrence grabbed his stuff and managed to turn and sprint back to his car, making it back safely to his home. Once he returned home, he was shaken and confused. He wasn't so sure of what the creature he had seen. He asked his hunter friends that he knew in the area and what they were encounter, but none of them had ever seen anything like it before, and they weren't certain. One of them suggested that it might have been a skinwalker. Lawrence had heard of skinwalkers before. Of course, they were natives that take forms of anything, and they have been around such as New Mexico, Arizona, and etc. However, though, he shuddered to imagine what he came to close so. Yeah, it came to close so much in the woods that he was relieved to made it out there alive and vowed to stick closer to the hunts around his neighborhood in the future. It's still shocking to this day of what this creature was, and he had thought that maybe it was just maybe stories, but however, after this encounter, he does not really know what to think. So this actually happened to a couple of my friends back in October of 2013. Now, for privacy reasons, I will call them these four teenagers. There's Kirsten, Ashley, Lee, Megan, Gin, and Josh. They had been around at school for a while, and this happened when they were in sophomore year. Megan, along with Kirsten, decided that they would go take a shortcut to get home from school through the forest. The forest wasn't far from the school, and it reached their street, so it wasn't really a far walk. They had gone through this many times. However, though, the others were very disturbed by it, but Josh decided to go with what the girls had. They decided to take a shortcut through the forest. However, instead of walking the long road, it was one of the last days of October, and the sun still hung open in the cloudy sky, casting a strange kind of light over the leaves over the trees. As if drawn by invisible force as they were walking, the teenagers found themselves walking up to what seemed to be an old abandoned car in the clearing. They paused and looked at each other. As they looked at the car and they approached it. They had no idea how the car managed to get there, as there was no roads for miles. They then thought that this car had been there maybe for a while, and they couldn't really identify by the year model, but it looked like it was a car from the 80s or 90s. However, as they approached the car, they ended up peering inside to find what seemed to be boxes in the back seat. The car looked like it had been there for a couple years or so. However, they opened up the car and what they saw was horrified. There were photos and videotapes of illegal content, to which clearly is depicting illegal activity. The teens were deeply horrified and troubled, and when they got out of that area, they reported to the authorities when they got back. However, police arrived later that day. When they arrived to see if they could get any evidence, everything had been removed. There was nothing in the car. The authorities were never quite sure who had taken away the evidence, but the teenagers could have never forget what they saw that October day in the forest. They still are not sure if whoever was still out there is still doing this type of thing, or what those were. However, they were illegal stuff, so they weren't really sure as to who could be the culprit behind all that. They never got into that clearing again, and they don't know to this day if the car is still there or not. But this makes them wonder, if the car is still there, could they have removed it? It's hard to say, since it has been a couple of years since then. This person's name is Jack, and he was about maybe 25 when this happened in October. It was sometime around 2018. He was sent off to work on a night shift, as he had pretty much had to do a night shift since a couple of people who had been, trying to take their shifts, but since he worked at a gas station, shouldn't have paid for his tuition in college, they unfortunately had called in sick, and that's when Jack had to take the shifts. He didn't really mind the night shifts, as it meant extra pay, especially it was on his day off, but he did get a little bit of overpay, so that was actually a good bonus. Jack was driving to his night shift. However, he decided to take the highway as it was a much easier route. However, as he was driving, he ended up looking over to start driving. However, this was when things were going around. As he drove on the dark, desolated highway, Jack noticed there was a car who was pretty much just driving close behind him. He was a bit concerned at first, but decided to ignore and focus on his driving, thinking that it could have been someone maybe tailgating or maybe someone trying to cause trouble on the road. Jack was used to this kind of thing, so he thought it was that. However, something began to strange happening, and he didn't even know what was going on. When the car began to flash lights and got closer to Jack, he pulled the car away and saw the driver's silhouette. The driver was really unsettling about him, and the sight caused him to run through Jack. However, the driver ended up pulling not far from where he was, and he ended up rolling down his window. He looked to be maybe in his mid-40s, and he looked like he had a bit of a beard. He looked at Jack and said, "Hey, where are you heading off to work or something?" he asked. "Why, yes I am," Jack replied. He was explaining to the guy that he was working at a gas station and he needed to get there for a night shift. "Oh, I am looking for my dog. I happened to lose him." Now this seemed obvious since the man seemed really, really off. Since why would he lose his dog in the highway? And if he did, why would he be out walking his dog at this time? This was really curious to Jack, but at the same time, he didn't really know too much about it. However, this is when things started to go really weird. What, of course, this was the next thing that Jack didn't know was that this man was looking at him and asking him for a ride. However, Jack ended up saying something. He decided to try and make a phone call, a fake one, pretending to be on the phone with his girlfriend just to try to give the man a hint to leave him alone. This is how their fake conversation went. "What, Jesse? Oh my God, you're in labor? Hold on, I'm on my way." As Jack said that, he ended up saying to the man that he had to go as his girlfriend's having her baby, and he sped off. Of course, that was when Jack had got away from that man, as he had an unsettling feeling that this man had no good intentions. Of course, this is when his heart raced, as, of course, when he was getting closer to try and get to the gas station. Jack had then stepped on the gas pedal and sped away as fast as he could. He drove more for 30 minutes, certain that he had lost the other man. Finally, when the highlight lights came into revealed, he was relieved, and then he felt he had managed to escape the danger. Of course, he thanked his lucky stars that he had not been lured and was able to get away safely. While he was working at the gas station, he was still doing his work when a police officer walked in at least 30 minutes later. Of course, Jack asked if there was a problem, and the police officer had said he had to bring him a few beers, and he had to ask Jack some questions. Jack ended up asking him what it was, and Jack was questioned by the police officer about the same car and whoever they were looking for. Jack ended up realizing that that was the same man who was trying to lure him out of his car earlier. As it turns out, that Jack had got more information. That driver was a sex offender who had already caused harm to many others, and he had been pulled over for trying to lure people into his car, including young women. Of course, that was when the man asked if Jack knew him, to which Jack gave him the best description and even answered questions as best as he could. It is still uncertain as to what this man had intentions on hurting Jack, but one thing's for sure, if Jack had decided to help this man, then something potentially terrible could have happened to him. He is still not sure if this man was ever caught or not, but he likes to think that he has been caught.